So check this out. On December 5th, 2025, two massive but totally different things went down in India. On one hand, you had thousands of people whose travel plans just completely fell apart, total chaos. And then, on the other hand, a huge decision was made that might actually change how you pay for your home. So, what's the connection? Well, that's what we're going to dig into. Yeah, I know. It sounds like one of those trick questions, doesn't it? A grounded plane and a home loan. What could they possibly have in common? But the answer, you'll see, tells this incredible story about where India is right now. And to really get what's happening at home, we've got to zoom out first. We need to look at the global stage, because that's where so many of the big moves are being made. All right, let's set the stage. Because, no country is an island, right? And India is definitely navigating some seriously tricky international waters at the moment. So let's do a quick run through of the big global stories that are making headlines and, more importantly, having a real impact back home. First up, you've got this major diplomatic dance happening in New Delhi. Russian President Vladimir Putin is in town meeting with Prime Minister Modi. They're talking trade, they're talking defense, but this is a really high-stakes meeting. I mean, it's all happening with the war in Ukraine still going on and huge pressure coming from U.S. sanctions. Talk about a tightrope walk. And hey, speaking of the war, there's maybe a little bit of good news, at least on the diplomatic side. We're hearing reports that some recent talks between the U.S. and Russia have been constructive. But let's be real here. After almost 4 years of fighting, the road to peace is, well, it's still going to be a long and bumpy one. Meanwhile, over in the U.S., things are changing. The country is tightening its immigration policies. We're seeing some big shifts, like much stricter rules for the H-1B visa program, and that's a huge deal for a lot of tech workers from India. Plus, there are new restrictions for refugees and people seeking asylum. And just to make things even more complicated, get this. A phone call has apparently been leaked. And in this call, it sounds like French President Macron is giving a heads up to Ukraine's President Zelensky. He's basically saying, hey, the U.S. might start pushing for a peace deal, one that could mean you have to give up territory to Russia. It just goes to show you how messy these alliances can get, right? Okay, so that's the big global picture. With all that in mind, let's bring it back home. Let's zoom in on India, because it has been a pretty dramatic day here too. We've got huge stories breaking in finance, in the courts, and, in travel. First, a major shock to the system for the economy. The Indian Rupee, it just hit an all-time low. It actually broke the 90 to the dollar mark for the very first time. So what's going on? Well, it seems to be a couple of things. Nervous foreign investors are taking their money out, and the price of oil we import just keeps climbing. Now, over in West Bengal, you can probably hear a massive collective sigh of relief from about 32,000 primary school teachers. Why? The Calcutta High Court just secured their jobs. They overturned an earlier ruling that was pretty controversial and had basically put all of their livelihoods on the line. So, huge news for them. And then there's this story. The one that has pretty much caused travel chaos across the entire country. I mean, we are talking pure mayhem at the airports. Hundreds and hundreds of IndiGo flights just canceled, gone. Passengers are stranded, angry, you can imagine. So the big question is, how did India's biggest airline just grind to a halt? Okay, let's get into this IndiGo mess. We're going to break down what looks like a massive operational failure for an airline that, let's not forget, flies more than half of all the domestic passengers in India. How did things go so wrong so quickly? The scale of this is just wow. Think about this. More than 600 flights either canceled outright or seriously delayed. And that's in just 2 days. For an airline as big as IndiGo, that's not just a bad day. That is a complete and total operational meltdown. So what was it? You might think bad weather, maybe a strike. Nope. The real reason is something you would probably never guess. It was a brand new set of rules that were actually put in place to make flying safer. So how on earth does a safety rule end up grounding an entire fleet? Okay, so at the center of all this chaos are these new rules called the Flight Duty Time Limitation, or FDTL for short. Basically, the aviation authority said pilots and crew need longer, stricter rest breaks, to make sure nobody's too tired to fly. It's a great idea for safety, right? Makes total sense on paper. The problem is, for IndiGo, it somehow caused their whole system to just break. It was like a domino effect. First, the new safety rules come in. Then, IndiGo apparently didn't update their scheduling software to handle these new rest times. And boom, suddenly they don't have enough crew. It got so bad they had to cancel every single domestic flight out of Delhi. And the craziest part? The recovery plan. IndiGo is saying they won't be back to a normal schedule until February of 2026. Yeah, you heard that right. So you've got this total chaos in one part of the country's system. But at the exact same time, another part was trying to create perfect stability. While all those travelers were stuck in lines, the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, was making a huge decision, one that's probably going to affect your bank account directly. So here's what they did. The RBI cut its main interest rate, what's called the repo rate, by 0.25%. Now, going from 5.50% down to 5.25% might not sound like a big deal, but trust me, in the world of economics and central banks, that's a major signal. It tells us a lot about what they're thinking for the future of the economy. So why do this now? Why make borrowing cheaper? Well, the RBI thinks the Indian economy is in what some economists call the Goldilocks zone. You know the story, right? Not too hot, not too cold, but just right. That's what they're seeing. The economy is growing nicely, but inflation isn't getting out of control. And that just right feeling gives them the green light to cut rates, hoping it'll encourage even more growth without kicking off a price spiral. Okay, so what does this actually mean for you, for your wallet? Well, it's kind of a good news/bad news situation. If you're looking to borrow money for a house, a car, anything really, this is fantastic. Your monthly payments, your EMIs, will probably start to come down. But if you're a saver, you're going to feel the other side of it. The interest you earn from things like fixed deposits is almost certainly going to drop. All right, let's zoom back out and connect all these dots. We started with that question, right? What does a grounded plane have to do with your home loan? And I think we've seen that on a day like today, the one-word answer is India. Because what we saw today is a country dealing with two completely different stories at the exact same time. On the home front, you've got the story of crisis versus control. You know, the total chaos at IndiGo on one side and the super careful, calculated economic moves by the RBI on the other. And then looking outward, you see a nation trying to find its way through a world of really complicated global politics and pressures. And that really brings it all home. In the middle of all of this, Prime Minister Modi made a statement saying that India is not neutral, but on the side of peace. It's a bold claim, right? It speaks to India's ambition to be a major stabilizing player on the global stage. But it also leaves us with a huge question, one that's maybe the question of our time. How do you manage all your own complex problems at home, while at the same time trying to help solve the problems of the entire world?